Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Spark of Genius Flesh and Blood production. Today we have a spicy deck tech that Eric is bringing to us today. It is the mech deck that he has been running in Armory lately. It is a Nitro Mechanoid dash deck. We've seen a few of these floating around. We've seen a list, kind of floating on the interwebs, but this is one that Eric has brewed himself, and he's very excited to show us what it can do, what are the the pros and cons to running this deck. Why would you run this deck in the first place? And just kind of results and different matchups, different sideboards. So all that fun stuff. So I'm joined, of course, by Eric, my co-creator, co-caster, co-commentator, and co-deck techer at this point. Not a C, but we'll add that on now.
Compatriot. I like how you're replacing that with.
Oh, that's a good point.
We're not
Compatriot. Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
Right,
Just sometimes. So welcome. How's it going?
It's pretty cold. It started snowing here in Vancouver. It's gonna snow all week.
Yeah, we got like 20 centimeters or something. Yeah, it's kind of crazy right now.
Oh, we only got 10, but 10 in Vancouver is like 50 in most other places in Canada.
Yeah. At least it's warm. We got snow, but it's warm in Ottawa. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, this list, I haven't played this specific list at any local armories lately, but I have played Dash a fair amount against testing different people. Brought it to a couple armories, stuff like that. So I've been experimenting with Dash quite a bit over the last month or two. You see the other deck tech that I did, the mid-range build with the more traditional build. That wasn't really on Nitro, just control boost. Mm-hmm. More similar to that kind of build. I think people that bring that sort of build is fine. Like nothing much has changed with that kind of build. However, it's still a very strong build. So
yeah,
this particular one is going to be focusing on a different side of Dash. Yeah, so this one is built a little bit differently. I think the main part is I wanted to explore the Nitro Mechanoid package. I think that Nitro Mechanoid is a very interesting card. So in that light, it opens the door for a lot of interesting ideas for the future of like what Flesh and Blood decks can be, right? So I really wanted to experiment to see if this really was better across the board or being specific matchups and such for Dash that had some pretty glaring weaknesses unless you built this deck very teched for a certain meta or for a certain hero. But if you didn't face that hero, you kind of fall by the wayside. That being said, we'll go into the equipment first. So this deck only runs Plasma Pistol. This is the best weapon.
You literally have to run the set of 5 equipments you've got, right? Because of the Nitro Mechanoid?
Yeah, so you do have to run it on the Nitro Mechanoid package. You don't necessarily have to run it into every matchup.
Okay, so the Nitro Mechanoid is a package of this deck. So it's not going to be the main strategy into every matchup. Is what I'm getting. Yep. Okay, continue.
Yeah, it's very similar to Denny's kind of Lexi package where he had like an ice and a lightning and they came on essentially. The only difference I would say is maybe there's like more specific targeted matchup 8 in this sideboard for like matchups that are very difficult kind of thing. That being said, as you guessed it,
you've got the literal only 4 mech pieces in those slots that have to be paired with Nitro Mechanoid.
For now, I'm hoping there's at the very least a helmet because I think a Visiatronic Model I is fine. I think it's like if you're not facing a Kano or Icelander, it's a little bit.
Yeah, I mean
a little mid.
Yeah, historically you'd only run that piece when you need the Arcane Barrier too. In this case, if you're facing anybody else, especially a Phi, that card is just kind of hot garbage. But you need it for when you're constructing the Mechanoid. So eventually, if we get an armor piece for the head that has maybe a temper or just not a blade break, because that's kind of defeats the purpose a bit, but something with some armor that you could use and still be able to use the headpiece for your Nitro Mechanoid.
Yeah, even a 1 battle worn is fine. That's like putting something very equivalent, like a rare, probably be fine. The only other equipment we run, Crown of Providence. So Crown of Providence comes in versus the aggro decks. Specifically decks like Phi, where you're going to be running 5 armor with Bender, Heart, and Providence. And the main reason is that you are not bringing in Mechanoid for that because you don't have enough time to set up Mechanoid into very hyper aggro decks. And it comes to play where that crown not only helps you sink a card to stay aggressive. So if you draw like a random blue that you like turn 1, you're forced to arsenal this like a random blue card, you can get out of it, right? And that's kind of the main thing. You don't want your hands to be like super super awkward because you really need to start, fighting for tempo as early as possible. So Crown does come in for the more aggressive matchups. This is the only like sideboard that is replaced here, so it comes in for I would say I wouldn't call it the mid-rangey. I would say it's like the more boost heavy plan that we run with like max velocities and such into decks like Fi. That's where it comes.
Speaking about the galvanic booster, have you thought about replacing it for a Goliath?
The Bender, you mean?
Bender, sorry, talking about boost all day. The Goliath Gauntlet is traditionally used for the arm piece, right? In I think in the previous deck we've done, and also on the list that we've seen before. Was there any room to slot that in, or are you still kind of experimenting with the thought of putting that in? No, okay.
No, every slot in this deck is like super super valuable. I would say even compared to most decks because your sideboard into your 2 packages essentially is very specific, and I think like having to add Goliath is really only good with Combustible Courier, and you need one to run the other, right? If you're running 3 Combustible Couriers, you have to run Goliath.
And I'm assuming Combustible is not in the deck.
If you're Combustible is not in the deck. No, Combustible is not in the deck. Combustible is really really bad without Goliath. Like off of Pounder, it's a 2 for 4, which is garbage.
Off Pounder is 2 for 6, right? Oh, that's what you meant. Sorry, without Pounder.
Yeah. Sorry. Without off. Yep. No, not literally using Pounder.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
When you start with Pounder, you draw Pounder really early or whatever. It comes out for 6. You just block with 2 pieces of equipment or whatever, right? Adding the Goliath is mainly the whole idea is to be able to either get an extra card that they don't have or don't want to block with, or getting that piece of armor that could be really crucial. But without it, you're just getting 2-card block, and that's about it. So getting over like a very specific matchups is just not ideal.
Sounds good.
Move on to the main board. So the main board is going to look very familiar because, it is familiar. This is not any kind of
Dash has a very specific set of cards that are just kind of always there and just always really good in most of the deck lists you're gonna see.
Yeah. So what I want to note is that other than Combustible Courier, there were a couple of red cards that I was considering. So some of the new cards like that came in Dynasty other than Pulse Wave Harpoon. So Pulse Wave Harpoon is obviously going to be the addition, mainly in the deck. But I was also considering cards like Scramble Pulse, and then another card, I believe it was another red 2 for 5 that had like an on hit. So it was definitely more impactful in a lot of different matchups. However, the other issue that I had with adding a lot of these cards is that the rate just wasn't really as good for the impact that you're getting into those particular matchups, right? So it's really outweighing those pros and cons that you get from running it in those spaces. So you'll see your staple reds coming in here. So you're going to have 3 of pretty much each of the red cards that I have displayed here. So you have Zipper Hit, 0 to 60. On rate, these are like the best cards in your deck, essentially. Then you have Pulse Wave Harpoon is the one addition from Dynasty in the red slot. So Pulse Wave Harpoon, very good against decks that don't really want to block you out. Decks like Fi, decks like Briar, a lot of decks that have like key pieces, they're like high-end combos are the target of Pulse Wave Harpoons. Also 1 for 4 go again, which is like pretty reasonable as a red. So you have Pulse Wave, you have the T-Bones here. So we are running the T-Bone package with reds, yellows, and blues. We're not running all the yellows, but I'll get into that a little bit later. We are running 3 of the reds. It's very, very good into decks like Fi and decks where their equipment have block value, but they don't want to block it unless there's an on hit, right? So the reason I say Fi is that all of Fi's equipment, other than like Furnace, which I don't think Fi's going to be running Furnace into you, has Blade Break, or if they're running Snaps, they have Snaps. But the idea is that if you can get a Shuko or a Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, their damage output drops, especially Pouncing Lynx, right? So those kinds of matchups that heavily impacted by T-Bone. There are some other matchups that their equipment does have armor that's a little bit more awkward later. However, you don't have that many on hits yourself. So really the job of T-Bone is to take away their effects on their armor, not necessarily taking away their armor to block something that's like you're not running CNC or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So no CNC.
No. And so your T-Bone is mainly used to reduce their damage output and not really to siphon their equipment earlier than
that
normal.
Makes sense.
And then you have these cards here, High Octane, very, very classic card, especially with Plasma Pistol. So you can stack high octane. High octane is a lot of the time your win con on like various cycles when you stack multiple high octanes. So
Hmm.
high octane, triple boost, and then hit a bunch with a pistol. Super common kind of late game strategy, especially when you're going into the later phases of the game, essentially when
Yeah.
you're on lower health and you really need to blow out the game against decks like Oldhim and such, Guardian decks, slower defensive decks. Pretty reasonable thing to do, but also fairly good just red 3 block that if you have to block, you can still block with it. Throttle and high speed impact. So red throttle kind of serves dual purpose. It's a popper, right? So
Right.
it's a popper and comes in for 6, so it's still on rate with like 0 to 60, 0 for 4, 1 for 5, 2 for 6.
Yeah.
It's just the added benefits. We have to run the full 3 because of Dromai. Not really a card you can consider popping unless Dromai just falls right out of the meta, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon.
Yep.
High speed impact is just another 1 for 4. There is really no other option. Pulse wave harpoon is like the comparable 1 for 4 with an effect. That's
Right.
really what it is, right? It's either a 1 for 5 with no effect or a 1 for 4 with an effect. High speed impact's effect is not terrible. Like giving something dominate and then you like throttle them for 6 dominate.
Yeah.
Could be worse. It's like a way of chipping in more damage, right? Because you really want to chip damage and then try to trade back the cards you boosted with hits for Teklo Pistol, right? So the idea is either they're taking damage off Pistol or they're giving cards back in block. So those cards you just boosted don't feel like they're just like wasted, right? Because at least they're blocking, unless they just want to tank their life for some reason, right?
Hmm.
So still like decently reasonable card. Still blocks for 3.
Yeah.
No,
I know
no issue
it's
here.
a card that does get cut sometimes in a lot of builds, just because the damage potential isn't as high as some of the other cards. But if you're looking at kind of inching out a game against a control deck or even to an aggressive deck that doesn't block you, you can get the damage through with this card. So it does depend on what you're going for. But so these cards here you have are run in both packages, I assume. This is kind of the core deck.
Mm-hmm.
You would not change. Okay, yeah, this is always run.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. These are the cards that are always run. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have 21 reds that you're going to run in all the matchups. You're going to move on to the yellow main board. A little bit more robust when we add in the Nitro package, but really your yellow cards are like there to facilitate your other strategies, right? So you have your zipper hits and your 060s just because you run rainbow of everything. They're just such good staple cards. All the like Welcome to Wraith Arc values, they don't really get much better than that. That's been like the baseline good.
Yeah.
There's really been no substantial power creep with any of those kinds of cards. So you're going to be running all of those. Spark of Genius, obviously, very acquainted with this card. Super. I think it's probably one of the best cards in the game, if not top 3 for sure, in my opinion. I don't know if it's the best, but it's definitely in contention. It's so good in any variety, any spice.
It always
like,
feels right to play it. You never feel like you're losing value playing this card.
Because you're not. Like any point of the game, it doesn't matter what you're grabbing. It doesn't matter if you've boosted. Like it just doesn't matter. You can grab a 0. You can grab a 4. Right. You can grab something for your control package. The lowest point you grab. You literally play this and you get a Teklo core. That's like the minimum. So you get to tutor a Teklo core. It was just like it's super good, right? So this just has that added flexibility of letting you search. On a particularly long chain, especially on high octane, what I like to do is actually just like play this with one of the action points because you boosted, it draws you a card.
Yeah,
it's like a mini Tome of Findel. You will notice that I am not running Tome of Findels. They are also not in the sideboard package. You can't really have your cake and eat it too here. It's really you're going for a Nitro sideboard package, or you're going for like more of a Matt Rogers style, like traditional mid range. Right. You could run tomes for racing, essentially those matchups to draw cards. Pray to God you don't boost it early, kind of thing. Which is the reason why it's also a 2-block. So like, if I'm running that card, I don't think I'm running Nitro. You just don't need it. So these are the main board cards for the yellows. So 9 cards total. So we have the blues here. So the main board blues, we're going to be running 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 main board blues. We do have blues in the sideboard, of course. 18 is a little bit on the low side for any dash build.
You just say 18, but I only see 2 high-speed impacts. Did you mean 17?
Sorry, I might have meant 17. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Yeah, 17. I thought I had 3. Oh, no, I only have 2 blues. That's correct.
Okay.
So most of the blues are pretty self-explanatory. The 060 zipper hit, as I explained, we're running Rainbow. It's a really good card to block, pitch, whatever you want. In a pinch, you can attack with them. They're not that bad. T-Bone, we are running the blue T-Bones, all 3 of them. Same idea. We want to have as many T-Bones as we can to early to be able to like hit 5 with them and try to get that blade, that tasty blade break armor.
Yeah.
And to that end, we have 3 magnetic shockwaves. So sometimes people run 1, they run 2.
Yeah.
I'm running 3. The reason I'm running 3 is because I really want like the maximum chance of being able to essentially not have to rely on T-Bone if I happen to not draw it, right? So magnetic shockwave, they must defend it. X equipment, they control X number you boost in the chain. So even if you're boosting with 2 or 3 other cards and you end with magnetic shockwave, it does cost 2 to be fair, and
so 3
it does
boosts early, I guess, is a little difficult unless you have Teklo Core, but then you can also play from Arsenal, so it's yeah, I mean it's a yeah, I think 2 is probably maybe what your sweet spot would be.
Yeah, it is something to note that it does specify the combat chain, so you cannot Foundry Heart this out. I know
it's a good
people
point.
like if you have one floating, do not Foundry Heart expecting to be able to play this to do anything. It is boosted this combat chain, so that is one thing. Obviously, it's really good with T-Bone. You T-Bone Meganetic, and you get all their right. No matter what they have, that's the standard.
It's a good 4-card hand. Yeah, just pitch a blue and play all 3 cards.
You literally just you don't even need a blue. You just need a yellow. Honestly, I mean you can load the pistol and do stuff, but like you really only need minimal kind of pitch for that. Of course, what you're doing is you're not presenting as much damage. However, you're reducing their damage by a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if you remove Mask from Phi, you know, that's amazing. Either of the masks really remove the Shuko.
You're taking 6 damage off the board here with links, right? And that's just super good, right? So if you're doing like 1 less throttle and damage for the turn, but taking their links, it doesn't matter if you had like the red throttler to begin with, or the zipper hit pistol, the 060 pistol, or zipper hit, or whatever. So you're running 3 of these. You're running 3 Scramble Pulse. Now I know many people are like, "What the hell is this card?"
New card.
It's a blue card coming out of Dynasty, right? So the red comes in for 5, the blues come in for 3, and the yellows come in for 4. I don't know why I ordered it that way. Don't worry about it. But my point is, I'm running the blues. It is a 2 cost. A little bit awkward getting out 2 costs. However, this card says equipment have -1 while defending this chain, and it has boosts. So it comes in for 3 damage, right? You're generally not going to be attacking with this. The reason why I have this in the main board is at the blue slot. Obviously, it's a blocking blue card, which is good.
Right.
But the -1 essentially hits anything that has temper. That means, so in case anyone forgot specifically the keywords for temper on like something like Courage of Bladehold, like the warrior equipment, for example, is when it goes to 0, it breaks, right? So generally with temper equipment, you block for 2, and then it has a counter, and then you use it before it breaks. You can block with it, or you can use it. So what you do essentially, if they block earlier on the chain somewhere with that piece of armor, what you do is you don't even have to boost this. This is the first line says that it just has -1. You don't, the boost comes, it's not as additional cost or anything like that. You don't have to boost it for that effect. What you do is then you end with Scramble Pulse. Scramble Pulse will give them -1 to that temper
retroactively.
Greater Fist. Yep. Because it's just while defending this combat chain. So as long as you didn't break the chain, which boost doesn't break the chain if you're boosting, and then pulse or whatever, it doesn't break the chain. And then you could put that -1, and then temper says that if the equipment has 0 defense, it breaks.
Nice.
It's really fun. Really good stuff there. So they're getting the 2 block, but then you're automatically taking the armor from them. So if they wanted to use it, they can't because it's broken. But this essentially comes in for 4, right? It's not actually coming in for 3. It's coming in for 4 because generally you're going to be breaking their 1 armor that they could have used on some other piece. But the main reason this is in is for if they have stuff like Stalagmite. It's mainly for Guardians. Stalagmite and Crater Fist are really good targets to hit. Stalagmite especially is a very, very good target, right? Because that actually also gives you a Frostbite too, which can hamper your turns depending on what you're trying to do. So this really helps take that kind of advantage from that extra either activation or just static ability or the armor. So it doesn't. It's kind of one of those like minor plus minuses that I put into the deck and tested. I quite liked it at blue. I didn't go as far as to add the red ones. I think that's pushing it a little bit. I got 2 for 5 with a very conditional effect is not really what I want to do in my 80 because I need very specific red cards for other matchups that I really couldn't take Scramble Pulse and run the red.
I think the blue block 3s are kind of there's a lot of room to play with when you're looking at a blue block three, because generally you're pitching it, but if you can give it a beneficial effect, it makes it almost like an auto include in most cases. In this case, you have magnetic shockwave. It has a really good ability. This card is very conditional, but I can see it work. Even if you play against a Bolton and they block with courage, well, you just ruined their Lumina turn. They literally cannot Lumina you at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So
Good
this
into
is an
warrior and good
auto
into
win.
guardian.
Yeah.
Yeah, warrior and guardian are like the main classes that have temper. I mean, if Skeletor was a thing, but
Yeah.
not anymore. I guess that'd be funny if Dash Fist would maybe look a little bit different with Scramble Pulse coming in this side. Yeah, high speed impact are just like the two remaining 3 block blues. I didn't really have space for the extra blue in the main board. I needed a space in the sideboard, so just running 2. If I had the space, I might run 3. It's the weakest of all the blues on this list. The effect doesn't do anything because it generally won't hit.
Yeah.
It's just a blue pitcher block.
That's fair.
And that's the main board. So that's 17 blues. So you have 30, you have 21 reds, you have 9 yellows, and you have 17 blues. You're looking at 47 card main board.
Awesome. So I guess we'll
out of that
now
47 card,
jump
now moving
into
to
the
sideboard.
packages. So you mentioned
Now,
2
the
packages. So I assume one package is the Mechanoid and one is a more aggressive tailored package, or aggressive / tempo tailored package into more aggressive decks like Fine Briar probably.
Yeah, and it really does depend on a couple of different things as far as the matchup. So it is broken up into like what strategy you're going for, but it also is broken up a little bit about, okay, you're going this strategy to this hero, but is there anything specific about the hero that you have to worry about?
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So I'll break out kind of the big piece here. So the big piece here is the Nitro Mechanoid package. And so the Nitro Mechanoid package is 3 construct Nitro Mechanoids, 3 yellow hyperdrivers, 3 red hyperdrivers. So we got 9 cards. So we're at 56 right now.
Okay.
3 sync belows. So we're at 59. And then, so essentially, we're at 59. But remember, one of these hyperdrivers is going to be your starting item.
Okay.
Into the Nitro package. So that is something important to note. So you are going to be starting with hyperdriver. So you can add 2 more cards. So those 2 cards are generally going to be reinforced the line. Not always, however, generally what it's going to be. It's reinforced the line and not Fate Foreseen, which would have been like the direct competitor. I didn't have enough space to run Fate Foreseen because the boost package was a little bit too. I decided to switch them out for a different card, which I'll kind of explain later. So this gets you to your 60 card main with your starting item, which is hyperdriver. The reason is because Construct Nitro Mechanoid does need 3 hyperdrivers, right? So you start with the 1, and you're running 6, so you have 8 chances to get it. So you have 5 hyperdrivers and 3 sparks.
Yeah.
Right. So you have 8 chances to get it. It's about a tenth of your deck. It's fairly reasonable that you get them like within a couple turns. It does happen more often than not. You'd be surprised. It's also very easy to get during that turn. So the minute you have it, it's easy to play at that turn. Whereas like the bigger items, not necessarily. Like if you want to spark out a 2 cost, you need 4 pitch, which is not always that easy to get. But hyperdriver only costs the 1, which is quite nice. So this is the main Nitro related package. You'll notice that I'm not running the blue hyperdrivers. The reason is the blue hyperdriver is real awful. Like the card doesn't block. None of the other ones block either, but the card doesn't block. It's blue. It costs 1. You're never going to want to play it. Playing it feels real bad compared to any other blue item you can play, like Pounder or Core. And it's too much to dedicate 9 hyperdrivers, rainbow hyperdriver to this.
I was going to add too that even if you have blue hyperdrivers before you play the Nitro Mechanoid, you cannot boost a card before playing the Mechanoid that turn, because if you boost a single card, your blue hyperdrivers get popped, right? The 1 counter is just going to dissipate and then you lose your hyperdriver. So it means that you literally, on your 1 turn that you have it out, you have to play the Nitro Mechanoid and end your turn pretty much there, right? So it's a little awkward with the blues.
Yeah. There is something to note that there's a new card that came out called Crankshaft, which does, if it is boosted, it does add a counter. Right. And the way the trigger works is you can use Crankshaft to keep your hyperdriver alive if only have 1 counter on it. So you just get the counter first, and then it uses the counter because it's just trigger second. That being said, you saw my blues. I don't run crankshaft in the deck. If I would play Scramble Pulse with it and run crankshaft, which is fine. I just don't think there's enough scenarios where crankshaft is that useful in this deck. And Scramble Pulse has like some really good upside for a blue 2-for-3 boost. So I run the Scramble Pulses instead. And so this is like the Nitro side, and this gives you like the full like 9 cards, and then you're starting with a red Hyperdriver. The other 5 cards are Sink Below and Reinforce. Reinforce the line is a little bit interesting. So Sink Below is pretty self-explanatory. So it filters your hand faster. So if you don't have like Hyperdriver or you're looking for Construct Nitro, it goes through your deck faster, and does allow you to like weather the storm of people like attacking you, because a lot of the times if you do have Hyperdriver in your hand, you're going to need to hold something back to pitch for it, so you only get to block with 2 cards. And it's very nice being able to block with some 3 block and a Sink Below for 7 than just like 2-3 blocks, right? So it gives you that extra point. It's good in the arsenal too, like it's pretty reasonable, helps with Dominate. So that is essentially the plan there for Sink. Reinforce the Line is a little bit interesting. It's not specifically for the Nitro package to like propagate the specific Nitro Mechanoid package. It does help get around some really tricky situations that don't allow you to have fun with the game, like CNC Pummel. Right, that's the big one. The Reinforce the Line stops. There are some like kind of glaring issues with it. The fact that by itself it doesn't do anything. It's only attack actions. Most of the cards in your deck are attack actions. Like there is like Spark and there are some items, but as you saw, most of the cards that I show, other than Spark of Genius, are going to be, and like if you're running Hybriders or whatever the package you're running, will be attack actions. It is also still fairly good into other matchups that you want to block with another card from hand, but you don't want it to represent a card. What I mean is Dory, right? So this doesn't trigger this by itself. Trigger Reprise. Still blocking from hand, and then you're reinforcing after. But if they have Iron Song Determination, this will get around Iron Song Determination, right? And you don't have to arsenal it. That's the key, right? So if you want to arsenal and construct Nitro Mechanoid, you can keep that in an arsenal and still have a pseudo D-React in your hand that gains you +4. Right. So it's really for those kinds of situations that you need to get around it. Very similar to like Oasis Respite in the fact that it comes from hand and it prevents or buffs the block of something. So this is going to be your like standard Nitro package.
Okay. There was a card that I would picture being okay. The one that brings back up to 3 Hyperdrivers from the grave. I forget what the name is, but have you seen any uses for that card, or is it pretty much fluff and your goal is just to get out the Hyperdrivers as you see them and don't really use them up?
It's too specific. So the issue with that card is that the Nitro package, Construct Nitro Mechanoid, is extremely strong. Like Nitro Mechanoid is very strong, and when you get it out, you have a much bigger advantage in the game than you had before. However, the problem with over committing to that package, it hurts your other package too much. Whether you're going control or whether you're going boost or whatever you're trying to do with your like pistol plan, taking 3 cards out of your deck for a red, like Blessing of Ingenuity is the card you're thinking of.
Right. Yes. Thank you.
But it doesn't matter what color you're doing. It's a useless card other than for this particular package. I think I considered it. I played for it for a bit, and I'm just like, the upside is so minor. Like you get to search from your grave or your banner. So essentially, if you end up boosting, you don't really want to boost that much before Nitro anyways, because if you start accidentally boosting all your Nitros, you're in dire straits, right? And you could end up boosting these sinks or reinforces. Like boosting before you have this combo is generally not what you want to be doing. So I think having like a safety plan to like get those back isn't really in my best interest. So I didn't really consider playing it over any other card in the deck.
Okay. And speaking of game plan, before you construct the Mechanoid, so you mentioned that boosting is pretty heavily taxing because you can boost away your key pieces, you can boost away non-mech cards. Is it mostly kind of a defensive strategy before you get the Mechanoid, or are you playing cards not boosting them out kind of thing?
Yeah, you're going to be on the defense. You can boost for good value. So if you have something like a I don't know, like double red throttle. So what you can do is you could essentially pitch a blue, and if you're on like 2 or you could pitch like a yellow and you're on 2 Hyperdrivers, those Hyperdrivers will proc and you'll be able to hit the second throttle.
Yeah.
There are situations, so you're essentially pitching 1 card for 12.
Okay.
But the thing is, a lot of the matchups where you're setting that up, you want Nitro Mechanoid on the field ASAP, right? And you don't want to like hinder the consistency. Isn't fantastic. It's good, but
Hmm.
it's not like you're absolutely going to get this off before turn 6 every game. This is
Yeah.
not. It's not how this works, right? And
Yeah.
there is no tutor for Nitro Mechanoid. You have to draw this the old-fashioned way. There's Spark of Genius doesn't get this for you,
Mm.
and that big because the actual this is not an item until it's built. Like this is just a mechanologist action.
Yeah.
Until you build this thing, it's not actually an item, so you can't search for it.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it's risky. You can. I think you're better off just blocking out, and you do have like a chunk of armor. Like you do have 3 armor at your disposal also. So I don't usually like to do it, but I have seen some situations where it's
Hmm.
okay.
Okay. And if you see the Nitro Mechanoid early on, I guess you just kind of arsenal it and wait till you get the hyperdrivers. That's pretty much the plan. Okay.
Yep, you arsenal it, and that's kind of where the reinforced line comes in, right? Because this gets around CNC, which is
Right.
my main issue when you arsenal Nitro and then an Oldhim and Bravo just CNC thread
Mm.
CNC pummel. The reinforce is just super good, right? That,
Yeah.
that that might save you the game straight up, and for anything that like hits the arsenal, so like I don't know, Heat
You have the
Seeker.
Ranger cards, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, Seek and Destroy is awkward because that thing just like it's really good into that particular.
Yeah.
If you Seek and Destroy, you just have to full block out and just pray to God you don't have like Hyperdriver in hand. Generally, yeah, you want to put it in Arsenal and just kind of go from there. Once you do get it out, it is very good because it comes in with a whole bunch of armor. Right? I think hits for you have pistol and then you have 4 pieces of equipment and then 3 Hyperdrivers. So you have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it attacks 8 times, 7 times for 6.
Hmm.
And the last time comes in for 5 because you have to banish the bender, which
Yeah. Always wait till the
the
very
plus
last
one.
attack before
Always,
banishing the
always
bender.
wait. Yeah, you'll notice. Yeah, Bender actually has text, and the text does say
Actually,
it actually has text, and it does say, well, under a permanent gains +1, plus
yep.
1 power. So that is important to note.
Yeah.
And generally, what you want to do, this does cost 4. So when you do have like Hyperdriver out, you do like you can
Yeah.
just boost a card to get the pitch, right? So you
Right.
get pitch or whatever. You'll boost. The only problem is if you boost and you hit like one of your very few generics, you're very sad. But generally, by that point in the game, you
Yeah.
might have seen a couple already. But that's just like the nature of it.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you're afraid of this, you could just add more mech cards that are in the sideboard for more 3 blocks, and that's probably fine. But it's just less defensive value that you might need. And
Yep.
yeah, you just boost a card. All your hyperdrivers tick, so you'll gain an extra 3 resources,
Yep.
and that 3 resources is going to be generally what generally all you
Fuels
need.
the cost of playing Nitro Mechanoid, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that being not said,
Haha.
I'll just screw with you guys. Anyways, so that's the nitro package. I'm gonna go over the reds first in order. So we start off with 2 payloads. So 2 payloads. The main reason is you need poppers into Dromai. So I've tried a lot of games with a lot of different amount of poppers. I've tried 6, 8, 10, 11. And generally what happens is that when you're running less than the sweet spot is like 8 to 9, in my opinion. When
Mm-hmm.
you're running less than that, you match up to Dromai just becomes doesn't matter what build they're on, your matchup to Dromai just becomes so much harder because their high roll potential and their stack potential to get such a big board that you can't deal with because because you're trying to like chip at dragons and such.
Yeah.
It's just very difficult. Even on like the pistol plan, which I don't have in the deck, but even if you're on pistol plan, it's still extremely hard without that many poppers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So mainly for that, comes in during like the regular games just as like a 2 for 6, which is fine. You can just block with it, right? Pretty reasonable. So it's the main reason is for that, but it's also just like not a terrible card to begin with. Speaking of poppers, the way we get to the 8 poppers is a triple max velocity,
Okay. Yeah.
and it is necessary for the boost plan. You need to attempt to do more unfair things to them before they can do unfair things to you. That is how the game works in an aggro sense.
Mm-hmm.
That means that if you can max velocity that 5 before they Artivore you for like some crazy damage, you're in a much better spot. If you could do this before Briar gets channel mount, same kind of idea. Very, very similar matchups if like this is the plan that you're going for.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I'll talk a little bit more about that when I like skim through all the matchups. So those are your red attack actions. You're running a single induction chamber, and let me tell you why. It's because I really dislike starting with Teklo Pounder. The reason being is that it's too easily blocked out in a lot of matchups, right? And so the matchups where you're not just like balls to the walls, you need to go as fast as humanly possible. You're not running hybrid driver in those matchups, right?
Right.
But you don't want you're not running the nitro package, and so if you're not running the nitro package, your option is like literally pounder, because you are running pounders in the deck. I ran one induction chamber because the idea behind induction chamber, Matt Rogers had a deck tech. He put it the best. Obviously, he'll put it the best way. The man knows his dash.
Mm-hmm.
But induction chamber is a way to gain back your cards. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. To gain back your cards, because each time you boost, it's costing you 2 cards per attack.
Mm-hmm.
When you 0 to 60, you're boosting a card. So you're really 2 cards for 4, right? You don't need to have them in your hand. It doesn't mean you're not using them. They are a resource. Your deck is a resource, right? And so what induction chamber does is it lets your pistol become a Nothos. That's my take on it, because I'm obviously a Guardian player, right?
Put a Guardian twist on it, yeah.
Because you get to use a blue to swing for 4. You use a blue, load, swing, induction, use the last one, load fire. 2 and 2, right? I look at it that way. It's better than a Nothos in one way, in that you're doing 2/2 instead of 4.
Yep.
So they need, if they only have 1 card to block with, they're taking 2 and instead of taking 1. It's worse than Nothos in that you need induction chamber just to turn pistol into a Nothos, right? So instead of like the 3rd payload, come in with the induction chamber. The induction chamber will come in any matchup that you're not running the nitro, and it'll be your starting item in most scenarios, not all scenarios.
Okay. And you still have
that is the one.
pounders in the deck still, so you can still get them out throughout the course of the game. Okay.
Correct. So I'm going to move on to the yellows here. So 2 yellow T-bones. I mentioned that I'm not running the full 9. I don't think you need the full 9 because you're on Meganetic anyways. You're on triple Meganetic. If I was on double Meganetic, I might run the triple T-bone, maybe. But even then, I think T-bone is fine.
Yeah.
You're kind of at the bottom of the barrel as far as your boost cards. You're like running all the relatively good ones under the sun at this point, without like scrambling into Dynasty territory, which a lot of them are very specific. You can run like zoom in or zoom out, zoom in, one of those cards.
Like zoom in, yeah.
I didn't really like it. It never really worked out that well. It is reasonable in Nitro because it helps you look for pieces faster, but I didn't really like it, and it would never ever come in not those matchups. But 2 yellow T-bones just to round out kind of more boost attacks, more blocks. Yellow is pretty reasonable.
0 cost boost attacks, really great for your maximum velocity plan, right?
Yes.
Really easy to get that off. You can get a few 0 costs before playing it out.
Yep. 0 and 1 costs are premium
boosts.
Maximum velocity. Yep, for sure. 3 Tekla cores. Tekla core is great. It's funny because I've been like running around with 1, 2, and or 3. And I've settled on 3 just because it's so damn flexible. It's one of those cards where you're happy if you're pitching it, you're happy if you're playing it, you're happy if you're sparking it out. It's a blue that if you play it, it's 4. If you pitch it, it's just a regular 3. And it doesn't require anything but the card itself.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it's a majestic. Let's be real here, right? There's a reason why. And I think it would be a shame not to run the 3, just because at some points of the game, when you need a target to spark, having through triple core where you might have pitched, you might have played and or pitched one pretty early, and sparking one out of the deck is a good way of both thinning the deck and giving you resource buffer, because if you end up having to block with your entire hand or block with 3 cards out of hand, core will always save you by essentially giving you a card back for multiple turns, for 2 turns. Essentially, you get a card yellow back, right? So I'd rather have 2 yellows I'd rather have 1 yellow for 2 turns than 1 blue in 1 turn. Yeah, and that's what this card does, right? It doesn't block, obviously. It can't be God, right? None of the items block for that matter. So it's not like anything crazy there, but very, very good card. I run 3 of those. And the one where I'm not 100% sold on running 2 yet, I'm between 1 and 2 right now. Needs a little bit more testing, but of course, can't ever do enough testing, can you? So I run 2 Tekla Pounders. The reason is that you need at least 1, obviously, for the boost strategy. It is a 2 for 6 over 3 turns, which is great. Early in the game, you can spark it out. You'll notice that I have an induction chamber, but if you start with it, you don't have any more 2 costs, right? So if you have your opening hand and you're starting with Spark of Genius and 4 pitch, you have nothing for 4 pitch. You're going to be wasting a bunch of cards. You could load them into Induction or whatever, or load them into Pistol, get them out of your hand, but it feels real bad, right? And so what you can do is essentially get that pounder out. The reason I have 2, funnily enough, is for that same reason. But if you start with a pounder and you have blues, pitch, and Spark of Genius, what are you looking for then? You know what I mean? You're looking for your second pounder, and that's kind of my initial thought that I ran with. I never usually want to play this. Like keeping pitch back to play this, not ideal, right? And that's why core is so good. You don't need to keep a card back to play this card, which is why it makes it so good. But I don't really want to keep back a yellow and blue to play pounder, which is why I'm definitely not running 3 of these, because you don't really need 3 of them. I think 2 is like the maximum I run. 1 to start with in some matchups, like Briar Fi. I think those are like the big ones because they're too fast. Like you're not going to get to this like mid-rangey Matt Rogers style where you're trading your boost economy for cards and stuff. That's not happening. They're going to kill you if you try to do that, right? If you try to just run Induction and start chipping away, you need to do really solid damage with that, right? So I think I don't like starting with this card. However, it is there to be searched, and it is a blue 2 for 6 over 3 turns. Very hard to ignore that fact, but in most of those other matchups, I think starting Induction is just always better because it turns your Pistol into 4, which is just super ideal when you have nothing to do, no attack actions that you want to play. It just increases your damage output by a lot. So that is the rest of the sideboard. So it's 1, 2, 4, 7, 10, 11, 13.
And your main board was 46, you mentioned, I think? Or was
47.
It's 47. Okay, yes, that rounds out 60 cards.
You'll notice that we're missing a card here because you're starting with 1, with Induction, right? So what I've been doing is I've been adding either a hyperdriver. I know, don't hate me. It is what it is. I just don't have the slots. A hyperdriver or a Sync Below. Now, ideal it's not. Especially into those boost heavy matchups. Then I'm probably going to be bringing in the hyperdriver and not the Sync because I'm going to be boosting a lot, right?
Yeah, you want to guarantee boost.
Yeah, it really depends on the matchup. So that's the deck. I will say that it's not perfect. I'm a little iffy on the 2 pounders. Don't hate me for the 2 pounders. I am still experimenting with this.
Between 1 and 2, I guess.
Between 1 and 2, I'm like, maybe I want another yellow T-bone, maybe I want a red payload. Both reasonable options. Maybe I want another blue block 3, because right now I have 18 blues, right? 18 blues? Yeah, 18 main board blues, and then we're adding in another 5 blues in this package. So you're 23 blues, which is a pretty good number, but you can make it one of them a 3 block. If anything, I might add the 3rd T-bone just to like have a better chance at max velocity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just think I like 23 blues.
Yeah, and if you're looking towards more of a tempo play style, it is 2 for 6, but it's also kind of like a tempo killer, right? You're playing it at the end of your turn, and you're giving the Fi or the Briar maybe more breathing room to come back with more damage.
You really
pay
want
them back, but it does limit your turn on what you can do up front, and that's kind of what tempo is mostly about.
Yeah, I really the more I've played, the less I've like started with Pounder.
Yeah.
Just because once it's gone, and then you have to go look for Induction Chamber, and you can end up boosting it away.
Yeah.
Right. You can always spark it, but you can always spark Pounder too, right? So that's kind of why I'm leaning towards 1 pounder probably being okay. It's just the fact that it's a 2 for 6 is just quite good. It's still payload, but you see where the dilemma is. So you play around with the deck and try this particular sideboard, and if you like it, don't like it. This is really just supposed to be like a baseline. It's not like a tournament report 9-0 deck or whatever, but it is a strong deck, so I recommend people kind of try that out. I can give like pretty basic matchup notes.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about the aggressive deck, talked about like Ultimate Bravo. Maybe let's just kind of categorize the matchups a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Pretty briefly.
Yeah, so into your mid-range matchups, think Dory. It's like your standard typical mid-range matchup. You are going Nitro package, right? So the reason you're going Nitro package is that this thing blocks for 21. There's no mid-range deck on Earth that can counter that. Like, you are
Yeah.
not losing that matchup.
You've got the
So you're gonna
breathing
go
room to
Nitro
set it
package.
up, right? You're not going to get run into the ground by turn 3, 4.
Works into Dory, Viscerai, decks like that. I think that it's it has it has its issues obviously, but into the mid range decks like that, I would definitely always go Nitro package. Into your aggro matchups, so I'm thinking mainly the big ones I'm thinking about are
So
Fi and
5.
Briar.
Yeah.
Those are the premium. Briar is going to Living Legend soon, to be fair, but not before ProQuest season's over, right? So going into
Yeah.
ProQuest, that is a deck you have to be very aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I think in that sense, like Azalea can be pretty aggressive. Like Lexi can be quite aggressive. I
That's
think
true.
she is definitely a very heavy aggressive deck, especially with more lightning.
Yeah.
Uh, but for Lexi, it's a little bit different. She can go ham, but she can also have on hits.
She's not
So that one I don't
always.
really.
Yeah, she's not always on, too, right? She
Yeah,
does have to set up a
exactly.
bit, whereas Fi with a 5 card hand, he can do nasty things all the time. Briar, I
Mhm.
mean, I guess Briar has to drop mount, but you're still kind of getting some damage in there with some pretty nasty on hits. So
Mhm.
Lexi can definitely have off turns, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And so the idea is essentially in the mid range matchup, set up Nitro, try win game. Very, very, very simple. Don't boost before you got the Nitro.
Um,
And into aggro, essentially you're running this package very similar to what you would do beforehand. You're running with pretty much the same tools other than Combustible Courier. It's
mhm.
really the only thing I've cut that's been major for the deck. You are running Crown of Providence in those matchups. So you actually have slightly more armor because you're not running Gauntlet, but you have, which is actually pretty good in those matchups to stop
Mhm.
like snatch and on hits like that.
Yeah.
So you gain that. You don't get the courier, but then you still get the rest of your tools are still there,
Yeah.
and I think that's pretty reasonable for those matchups.
Mhm.
Um,
I guess we can
Funnily
talk
enough,
about.
Briar, I think
Oh,
you could run like construct into Briar also. I think Briar, funnily enough, both of these strategies work.
mhm.
I think that try both and see which one you like more.
Yep.
But based on what I've tried out, both of these strategies can work against Briar. This one is just more tried and true. Doesn't mean they
Yeah.
can't channel out high roll you, but yeah, those are
Yeah.
those matchups.
That's like
Uh,
kind of going by the book, right? You're thinking more about being defensive against Briar, and then or sorry, not defensive. I'm sorry. You're picking the aggressive tools here against Briar because you think that you want to race her before she can get channel mounts. You want to get a very nice maximum velocity into her before she gets
you
channel
you
mounts.
need
Yeah.
Yeah, you need maximum velocities to win both of those matchups
Yeah.
if you're going
Yeah.
that route. Like if you end up boosting maximum velocities, like you're in dire straits. You really need that as your like unfair mechanic. You are on high octanes, so like you can boost a lot and just pistol them and try to like chip more damage.
Mm.
And you do have pounders to create like extra value, but it depends on how fast they can go essentially, right? So that is that matchup. I think Kotz, welcome to Wraith. Kotz is mid range, so just construct.
Mm-hmm.
Rhinar is always going to be an issue because of Arc Smash. I don't know how many decks are running Arc Smash. I'm hoping that, for whoever's running this deck, I'm hoping for their sake they're not running into Rhinar with Arc Smash like
Yeah.
that. No matter what strategy you're on, it's going to hurt. So running Construct into that is just like you're asking to get destroyed here because they're just going to hit Hyperdriver and you're going to lose, right? It's a matter of like you don't insta lose in that scenario because you have other hyperdrivers and maybe they don't high roll on the arc smash.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this strategy into Rhinar is also not great in that you can win. However, I'm gonna start induction to that matchup, and if they happen to have an arc smash, and then I have to pounder,
Mm-hmm.
it's not great. And
Yeah.
they can like take all your cards. They can
Mm-hmm.
take all your cards
Yeah.
with
They
intimidate
can.
and just
Yeah.
bash the shit out of you, right? So I think into Rhinar, I would actually construct as if it were just any other mid range deck. Funnily enough, into Rhinar, the only change I would make, I would not run Reinforce the line.
Okay.
I would run two payloads. The reason I would run payloads is they're just 3 blocks and they're fairly efficient. If you have nothing to do, like you can pitch a blue and come in for 6. If you have absolutely nothing to do, it's decently reasonable.
Right.
I wouldn't take damage to do it, but if you happen to have it, it's a 2 for 6. So I would, instead of the reinforces, because this, if they intimidate all your cards, this does nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and this doesn't count as 2 blocking cards for Barraging Beatdown.
Exactly.
So that's the other reason
That'll
why
still
we're
proc.
running those with Rhinar.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess going back to the Arc Smash point, I guess because you only have 6 hyperdrivers and not 9, if they break 4 of them, you're screwed, right?
Correct.
Because you would need 3 of them to construct. So if they break 4 of them, so I guess they have more leeway on the Arc Smashes. I guess if they roll like 4 and up twice, that's kind of ruins your plan, right?
Well, the issue is that construct is also an item by itself, so
So
you
they
can
can
arc
blow up. They can
construct.
blow up construct Mechanoid with the Arc Smash, right?
Yep, this
Yeah.
is an item.
Okay,
You
so
just
if you
have to
yeah,
like
so if they just wait
beat
till you
them
get it
down.
out, and then they, I mean,
Yep.
if I was a Rhino, I'd probably wait with Arc Smash just until you got the Mechanoid, just blow it up.
True, but
Yeah,
so on the flip side, if they set up high octane, so like once they get it out
yeah,
and they try to get maximum damage off
right. It
construct
might be
Nitro
too
Mechanoid,
late, too little, too late, kind of thing.
they're also still doing damage on that turn. Like
Hmm.
when you construct this, you have go again. You're still hitting for at
Oh,
least
okay,
6,
right. So you
and
don't lose the action point there. Yeah. Okay.
you need arc smash and you need a pitch. You need to keep back 2 cards, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so generally you'll be boosting, and then you'll construct, and then
Mm,
you'll hit. So you can still have a big turn before they end up blowing it up. And if
okay.
all Rhinar does back is destroy Nitro,
You're
then
looking
you just
kind of
have
good,
to
I
boost.
guess. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, your whole game plan went
Yeah,
out the window, but at least you got a good like maybe 10 damage in before
yeah,
you can kind of start clawing back with your other boost cards.
yeah. I would probably try for Nitro. I think this can work, but they can all just block you out. All their cards block for 3.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on what kind of deck they're on. A
Let's
more
go to
aggressive Rhinar.
how about the Guardians? We can jump into those
So
guys.
Oldham, yeah,
Yeah.
Oldham and Bravo. So you're not running this construct.
Yep.
So generally into Guardians, what people have been doing is pistol package. So that involves Plasma Purifier and Induction Chamber, and you're just trying to set up Exodia and kill them.
Mm-hmm.
I think this works if you're on 11 plus D-Reacts and defensive cards. By that
Yeah.
I mean you're running triple sync, triple unmovable, triple fate, and then you're running two or three reinforce the line. I
Yep.
think if you're on that package, you're probably fairly favored depending on their build. But even in the most aggressive matchups, if you're running 11 plus defensive tools, you should be fine. The problem is that that package is so heavy. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
cards that you're dedicating for like one matchup. I guess Bravo and Oldham, but one like archetype that you're really trying to fight. And if there are a bunch, if Gem doesn't give you them, like you just built like that package isn't to that extreme, is not as useful into a lot of the other matchups, right? You don't need all the unmovables and stuff like that into non-guardian matchups. Like it's okay into Dory, but you're running construct into Dory. So a
Yeah.
lot of those matchups are already covered. So because of that, we're not running this into Guardian. We're running construct into Guardian. We're treating it kind of like mid range and just praying to God we can get it out before
Yeah.
they ruin our
Take
dreams.
advantage of the breathing room you have, and then
Yeah.
just set it up.
So the difference is that we're taking damage from their big attacks, but instead of going towards Exodia, where we still need to pitch to load everything and fire everything, so we're gonna always have to keep cards back.
Right.
We have construct Nitro, so we could still block with our entire hand unless they're dominating us.
Yeah.
We get to swing for 6 every single turn, right? And so that's how we try to achieve parity. Because the issue before is that you've had to set up your Exodia, but then you've had to keep cards back to pitch into it and start swinging into them when they just ramp hard and kill you, right?
Yeah. The
And
rampart is a
so
problem. Yeah.
in those two decks, you're trying to set up high octane construct turns. That's going to be your best chance of winning. When you high octane, you boost a bunch, and then you hit them with construct a whole bunch of times with overpower. I think is the not overpower, the one overload. No overload. You know what I'm talking about, right? Oh, overpower. It is overpower.
Overpower. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
The last matchups I'll talk about wizards.
Yep.
So Icelander and Kano. It's actually funny because you're running Arcane Barrier 3 regardless. So I think into Icelander you can run either build. Either build is good into Icelander. I think Dash in general is favored into Icelander in a lot of different builds. I think either of these builds work. I would recommend that you yourself try both of them and see which one you like. I personally like the Nitro build better into like the Hamiltonian Icelander, the Bullander.
Right.
I personally like the construct. I think you have more than enough time to set up. Like you have no issues with that, and you will crush them before they get to their Frost X plan. Like, and you really don't care about the extra pitch off ice because you have hyperdrivers, and by the time you have construct, it doesn't cost you anything either. They're gonna be like responding to it, and you just pitch and kill them, right?
Yep.
But I think boost strategy also works too. No particular
No
problem.
issue.
You
Yeah.
have so much pitch. you have so much pitch off Technical Core, and you have 23 blues.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a lot they can do to tax you. And you're running Arcane Barrier 3 in those matchups. You're running the Geotronic and you're running the Achilles, right? So those are that matchup. Kano very similar. I think you can run both. I think the boost plan is slightly more preferable.
Yeah, because
Kano,
of the
you just don't have enough
life
time.
lead, I guess, too, right? They are hitting more than Icelander with the starting health.
Exactly, and I think that it's a matter of I don't think you have enough time to set up Nitro Mechanoid into Kano.
Yeah.
Overall, I think Kano can kill you in 3 or 4 turns, and I don't think you can get Construct out, but you might not be able to kill them with Construct before.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're gonna go through. You're gonna go on this package with into Kano, but in Icelander you can go with either. Dromai I mentioned earlier. You run all your poppers. Dromai is really hard even for the regular matchups. A very skilled Dromai player is going to make the matchup really, really difficult for you. What I recommend doing is figuring out which style you like more and more comfortable on and try that style first. I think you're going Construct and you're praying to a higher power that Tumultai doesn't hit the board before Construct goes away.
Yeah.
Because if Tumultai gets one of your equipment, you cannot summon the Mighty Construct. Yeah.
Luckily, it's a one-of. Luckily, it's just a one-of.
Yeah. Luckily, once you get the Nitro out before, Tumultai can only put a -2, right? So Tumultai cannot kill this thing once it's out. It's not like Arc Smash, which can kill it.
It's a conditional blow up based on how many reds. Yeah.
And people are like, Kylori can steal this. I'm like, this could block. Like, what do you just block?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the thing is, there's no tricks. Like, you can't attack react. The Kylori attack is coming in for 4. You're not stealing.
Yeah. No shenanigans with that.
So those are most of the matchups. Any of the other ones I didn't mention, you can ask in the comments and I'll comment on it.
Yeah.
No problem with that.
Cool. Okay, so that was the deck tech. Yeah. So I mean, I gotta say, this is one of the most exciting decks that has come out in recent times because probably there isn't much more that rewarding in this game than getting out the
Summoning Power Ranger.
Yeah, exactly. Getting the your Optimus Prime, getting your Power Rangers.
the Nitro Mechanoid. That's what I heard.
Yeah, so I mean, this deck is nothing. If anything, it's rewarding to play. You know, you've seen some success in these matchups, and you've kind of demonstrated that there is a way to play both the Mechanoid package and your regular boost strategy into some matchups where the Mechanoid was kind of just unplayable. So that was the main concern, I think, with this build, was that it's very slow, but with your sideboarding, you've shown that you can do both. So yeah, I mean, to anyone watching, feel free to try this deck out. It's one that I will definitely be playing in the near future. I did have my own version of the deck. It sucked. That's why Eric's doing the deck tech today. So, but it is rewarding. Take my word for that. So yeah, thanks again, Eric, for showing your deck. I'm very excited to try it out. And with that, if you enjoyed this kind of content, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And wherever you are in the world, have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Bye for now.